Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Gather for Her. Welcome to this week's conversation, another conscious conversation in co-creation, deep listening, wisdom gathering, and just trusting to see what we're meant to learn this morning from each other and beyond to help heal ourselves and in community for growth and expansion. I'm Charlene Sinjenko. I'm the founder of Powerhouse, and whether you are joining us live this morning or watching a recording or listening to our podcast, we just really appreciate you joining us this morning. We have a great conversation coming up. Before we do, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge my home here on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. I am so grateful to live on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish First Nations. Just deep gratitude for where I call home in community. And I'm going to welcome my co-host this morning. I'll turn it over to you. Sharon, I'm going to pass to you to introduce yourself. Good morning.
Thanks, Char. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with all of you. My name is Sharon Marshall, and I am Métis Cree from Treaty 6 territory in Edmonton, and I am currently blessed to be on the traditional and ancestral territories of the Snuneymuxw and Tsinawas First Nations on Vancouver Island. And I come to you today to bring an Indigenous lens to the conversation, and I'm just really excited to hear what Madeleine has to share with us. And so I'll pass it off to Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and good morning. I'm feeling a little goopy today, just a little soft. I'm grateful to be here, calling in from Nequalaquam, also known as Bowen Island, and the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish people. I feel like I'm floating on the Coast Salish Sea as we look out with all the big rain that we're in. And I'm grateful to be here in a Changemaker conversation with all of you. I am a story keeper, holder, and listener, and my ears are wide today. So thank you. And I will pass to you, Miss Christina.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina. Oh, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to everyone, wherever you are joining us from, whether it's your first time or however long you've been here, all of you is welcome to be here. I am super excited about this conversation this morning. And as Shar was saying, the part of our intention with Gather for Her is really gathering wisdom and elevating the collective consciousness through the wisdom that is curated and gathered. So I am so excited about how this happens for all of us in this experience. I am joining you this morning from the very chilly Rocky Mountains in Golden, BC, the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and the Shuswap peoples and the Columbia River Métis. And I am pleased to, as Sharon said, feel so blessed to be where I'm from, even though it's a little chilly this morning. So thank you. Back to you, Shar.
I'd like to introduce you to our guest and a very special friend of Powerhouse. You know that saying that people come into your life for a season and a reason, and well, there's also people that consistently come into your life at different touch points. And Madeleine Shaw is one of those leaders for me. Madeleine has touched my life over numerous times and cross sections, and I've always gained inspiration, wisdom, connection, and just positivity every time we've come in contact with each other. A few memories include meetups at different conferences, whether it was the Social Venture Institute or SheEO, whether it was having Madeleine and Suzanne speak at a power lunch, just everywhere I've ever searched for like-minded souls who wanted to move impact forward in the world. At the periphery, not too distant, was Madeleine. So I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about her. She's best known, I think, as being the co-founder of what I know formerly called LunaPads, which is now called ISLE. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. One of the first groundbreaking ventures in the world to commercialize reusable menstrual products. And today it's a thriving industry. We also crossed paths through another amazing initiative that she founded in 2014 called G-Day, which is a national event series for tween girls and their supporters. And in 2017, Nestworks, which is a family-friendly co-working community. We're going to talk about Madeleine's path, her leader path as a changemaker, and most recently on the path as an author. Her book is called The Greater Good: Social Entrepreneurship for Everyday People Who Want to Change the World. She offers through the pages of this book encouraging tips and reflections for aspiring impact-based entrepreneurs. And we're just going to give Madeleine a few minutes to reconnect. There we go. Social change leadership is Madeleine's deepest calling. So without further ado, there's so much more I could say, but I'm really going to welcome Madeleine to add a bit to that as we dive into the conversation, and just deep gratitude for being here this morning.
Thank you, Charlene. Well, it's okay. So hello, everybody. My name is Madeleine, and I'm thrilled to be here. I am joining you from the traditional unceded stolen territory of the Musqueam, Kwantlen, and Stolo First Nations, just south of Vancouver. I'm just really grateful to be meeting all of you and sharing with you, and just in this beautiful container this morning. So let's see what happens.
Amazing. Well, I know you and Christina have recently really had a great connection, and I'd love to pass to Christina now. We have a little bit of sound. If it doesn't improve, Madeleine, just a little glitch, I may ask you to go out and come in again, but let's just give it a moment. We're just going to breathe through it. Christina, I'll pass it over to you, and just welcome this morning, and thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you. My pleasure. Charlene's right. I had the opportunity to speak with Madeleine a few days ago. I think actually last week, and I started reading her book and doing a little research on her. And I don't always do that with guests, but I tell you, it was one of those magnet experience where Madeleine and I had this conversation, and as Charlene said, she said that Madeleine touched her life. I'm like, how did that happen in like 45 minutes, where I had this conversation with this woman that was just like zing, zing, zing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm already completely enchanted and inspired. And so like I said, I'm very pleased to be here and so excited about this conversation, because, and in reading your book and doing a little bit of research on you, and of course our conversations together, you, as Charlene said, you are a change maker, but you also help other people see themselves as change makers, and that's some of the work that you're up to in the world is really holding up that mirror for others to allow them to see what's possible for them. and to see themselves as change makers. And we talk a lot about that in here at Powerhouse, and we talk about how that the relationship with change making and braiding, and how we can't do this alone, that we we need each other, and we need those collaborative relationships. We need those meaningful conversations that elevate that frequency in our lives, right? And so our theme with Gather right now is around braiding impact. And so I'm curious if you can speak a little bit more about that and how that plays out in your life, and what does it mean to you, and why does it matter at this time, and how has it mattered throughout throughout the work that you do in the world?
Wow, there is a lot there to unpack for sure, and I love all of that, and I love the metaphor of braiding, and I know that's a really, really important Indigenous wisdom concept as well. And in the book, there's a few themes that relate to it right off the top of my head, and one of them relates to building community and relationship, and that's something I speak about a lot in the book. And essentially the idea that collaboration is the new competition, that the ethos, the prevailing business ethos that we're coming out of the capitalist colonized kind of era was very much about individual success, and those types of identities where this kind of rugged individualism and the unicorn and the those types of things. And it's just not, in my world, it's just not real, and it's not helpful, and it's not what it's going to take for us to essentially save ourselves at this point. But it's also just what feels better. I think it's naturally what women do. Is I was interested to hear on a CEO podcast recently how they talked about there's another kind of adrenaline response that people have in addition to the fight or flight or freeze, and it's called tend and befriend. And the reason why it wasn't known until now is because the research subjects had only been men, and so they'd only observed those types of behaviors. And this tend and befriend thing in a crisis situation is a very real human response. So I would say there's that, and also this notion of identity. So who is a change maker? Who is an entrepreneur? And this is something that I talk about at length in the book. And I hear so many people, I'll do, some kind of public speaking, or I'll meet someone and they'll say, I've got this idea, or I would love to start a venture, but I'm just insert whatever brilliant thing that person is. I'm just a parent, I'm a teacher, I'm a scientist, I'm an engineer, I'm an artist, I'm whatever. But they just won't claim the mantle of entrepreneur. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Like in our popular public imagination, that stereotype is mostly occupied by white men in Silicon Valley pitching disruptive technology plays. And so we don't find ourselves in that. We don't look at that and go, hey, that could be me. Partly because we don't look like them, partly because we're not interested. We're thinking about ways to make the world a better place, as opposed to just make lots of money or, fire up rocket ships or that type of thing. So the book in many ways was written to kind of demystify this notion, and also democratize and make the notion of entrepreneurship much more accessible and inclusive to everyday people, which of course is the other part of the title. And the purpose of that is to build community, to get just more people activated as change makers in the world right now, to bring their ideas, because we need them.
Oh yeah, and there's a couple things that you talk about in the book, and that is that we're all the hero in our own story, right? And so how do we actually activate and amplify, which is really so much of the work of Powerhouse, is activate and amplify the hero in us, that really, that's actually going to be what what moves us forward. And what trips us up oftentimes, and you and I had a conversation about this, is imposter syndrome, right? And there's lots of conversations about imposter syndrome, and what helps you move through that? What has helped you move through that? And brought you to this place to live in its awareness, but not have it be the thing that trips you up. Because I think that's important for folks to hear.
Thank you for that, Christina. And yeah, I think so everyday people, so those people who I talked about, who are like, I'm just this, I'm just that, I'm not an entrepreneur. There is a sense that we are not fully claiming our power, and which is because it's hard to do. Like, we're living in a world that does not, celebrate everyday people as leaders and as our voices as being important. And, we know all about what that looks like and why it is. And so I'd say with imposter syndrome, we teach what we need to learn. And I'm very transparent about this in the book. Like, it's something I've struggled with. Self-doubt has literally racked me. Like, even on the day when I was launching the book, I was just seized with the most absolutely, it was just awful. Like, I could hardly even speak, and so what I did is I phoned up a friend of mine and I reached out to my community. And, relationships are everything. And as you said, you spoke to this a bit earlier, like being able to have people around you, and this is exactly the work that you're doing at Powerhouse, and to lift up and reinforce and reflect and do all that work to lift one another up, because it is hard. Like, we are trying to dismantle some of the most pervasive, or even just exist, just to live, just to breathe, in some of the most oppressive power systems that have ever been created in human history. And anybody who does not, belong to that power paradigm, and in many ways I acknowledge I do, and I think it's an important thing that we all acknowledge kind of where we are situated in that situation. But it's hard to find your voice. It's hard to be affirmed as a leader, as someone who has something valuable and important to say, and to see yourself as a hero. And one of the things I discuss in the book, I call it picking up the sword. And what I mean by that is, it's not a sword of violence. It's a sword of resisting oppression. Because when we step into our power and when we step into our ideas, that's what we're doing. It's like you've got it. It's not a neutral ground that we're already on going, hey, cool, look, I've got this great idea. Let's do this. Like, you are challenging entrenched and embedded power systems that are very real and don't necessarily want the change that you're proposing, whether that's, about healing the environment or empowering Indigenous people or women or, other marginalized groups. So it's work that way, and social entrepreneurship by definition, I think, is sort of a doubly hard thing to do, because to the entrepreneur variety, to, like, let's take ethics and sustainability and trying to change the world, like, let's strip that out and just go, okay, you've got to create an entity, for profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter. It needs to work. It needs to be financially self-sufficient. It needs to do what it says it's going to do, and so on. That's an incredibly hard thing to do, just so we're clear. And then on that, on top of that, you layer it, and I'm going to make it super sustainable and ethical, and it's going to have this incredible social impact. So you're like doing this like triple Lutz, basically, of activity to create something awesome, and then doing it from within a context of systemic, embedded social inequity. And so it's like, I don't want people just to think, oh yeah, go and change the world. It's, I've got a beautiful vision and whatever, it'll be easy. For everyday people, it's not. And that's why communities like this are so vital, to help us really start from the inside, knowing that we need to fortify ourselves on a spiritual and emotional and a psychological level in order to be able to do the work that we're capable of.
I want to jump in if I can. You said a number of things. And in the beginning, you said this thing about, who is a change maker, who's an entrepreneur. And you said, won't claim the mantle of entrepreneur. And what came up for me in that moment was, wow, you know what? I actually put entrepreneur down a long time ago because I put a story around entrepreneur, that entrepreneur is all about me and Changemaker is all about us. And so when you said claim the mantle, because the other thing that I heard when you were first introduced, I was like, oh, entrepreneur, check, entrepreneur, check, entrepreneur, check. Wow. She launched three businesses. Whoa, that's an entrepreneur. Huh. And so I want to name and point to a noticing of anyone, for anyone listening, that you can be, I didn't know you could be an entrepreneur and a change maker. Like, I didn't know that. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm curious if anything comes up there. So I want to name that. The other piece that you said, you used the word fortify. I was like, oh, that's juicy. I would love to just unpack what that word means for you, because it's not a word that I've heard in this space before. We hear the word lift and we hear the word, weaving, but fortify's got a different resonance to it. And then I just love, oh yeah, the other thing is, because this came up in the last gather for her, was I'm gonna have to pop it in the notes because I can't remember the name of the book, but it's the heroine's journey, the Virgin's Promise is the name of the book, versus the hero's journey. And I just want to name, because that came in last time in the last gather for her. There's something about this hero's journey we know is, beginning, middle, end, cross the finish line, beat the dragon, change the world. But the heroine's journey is more of an awakening, and then a collecting and a bringing back to the community. And yet this entrepreneur energy must live in there too, because that's the impulse of I am, so I will. So whatever comes up in these three pieces, marbles I put on the table, where do you want to go? And thank you.
So I love your questions. This is so good. I love it. I love it. Okay. So the mantle of entrepreneurship versus changemaker. This speaks exactly to the reason why in the book, I'm trying to unpack and demystify and democratize and just otherwise render more accessible the word entrepreneur. So it's derived from a French verb that simply means to undertake. And I know it's a super fancy word. Look at all those vowels. My goodness, what can this mean? It's some grand sort of thing. And it's like, no, it means somebody who's just kind of like an artist. You're creating something that wasn't there before. And in the case of social entrepreneurship, you're doing it from a place where the heart is coming from impact. That is the whole thing that is moving you. And typically what I've seen, like I surveyed over 100 social entrepreneurs as part of doing my research for the book. So it's not just my story that's in the book. I've got the stories of a couple of dozen people in the book that were drawn from over 100 different stories. And they all transformed. There was some kind of personal experience, something that either was really hard, a challenge that they met. And this speaks to your question about the heroine's journey. And I know, anyways, we could go on and on about Joseph Campbell and feminist interpretations and all those things. And I feel like we could devote an entire episode just to that thing. But either way, something has happened to this person to give them insight, to show them some form of inner resilience, to kind of push them to create change, to fight back, to create something that didn't exist before. And that in that transformation, when people can kind of allow themselves to do that and to act from that place, to broaden their sense of identity, whether it's as a change maker or as an entrepreneur or as, maybe there's other language that they're creating for it, which is beautiful. But the point is that we all need to be willing to kind of break out of and broaden and allow ourselves to just expand. And I think that speaks to the fortification is really coming from how others are building us up. So fortification meaning strengthen. Look at powerhouse. Power. Come on. Like, it's built right into the name of this community. Like, this isn't just a feel good, let's sit down and, have a big cry. It's like we are fortifying one another. This is what we do. It's an act of love, it's an act of creativity, but it's also an act of resistance. And I think that brings up this kind of warrior hero. I discuss archetypes in the book, and those can be used in so many different ways. And whatever cultural traditions you're drawing from or that are resonant to you, but just kind of finding kind of an outer representation to help you feel fortified in terms of your inner hero to undertake something amazing is what I'm seeking to do. So my final comment on that about this, I'm just going to keep calling it the hero's journey, and my intention is a gender neutral or inclusive interpretation of the word hero. But I see it as cyclical. And this is something that rather than the linear, the traditional start, middle, end, quest, success, whatever, return, the 3 stages of the, traditional rites of passage and so on. I feel like the way I look at the world is a much more cyclical representation. And I do discuss this in the book because often they're afraid of failure, or they're afraid of an ending or letting go of whatever it is that they start. And I posit that everything is building on something else, and that our orientation in kind of a colonized patriarchal mindset that we've all been socialized within that, where there is this linear interpretation of everything, is something that I think is a false narrative that we need to really question and reimagine for ourselves.
Oh, wow. Awesome. And it's interesting because there's a couple of things that are coming up for me, and that is that our colonialized way of thinking with our power structures are actually it's the water we swim in. Unless we look around and go, oh, this is the water I'm swimming in, we actually don't even know, right? And it takes a level of consciousness shifting to recognize the water. So I'm curious, Sharon, what's coming up for you in this conversation?
Thanks for asking, Christina. So there's a few things, and everything that you've said so far, Madeleine, just keeps coming back to Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and the last word, cyclical, really sat with me. You talk about um, dismantling the oppressive power systems, and and it's hard to find your voice, and so that's for an everyday person. Imagine an everyday person and Indigenous on top of that, we have um, struggled with the oppression for the last 150 years, and um, I haven't read your book yet, but it's on my list, and I understand from this conversation what it's about, and I applaud you for writing about it. Um, but I'm curious about the Changemaker for whom you wrote this book, and why. If you could just narrow it down to just a couple of words, why, who that person is. I mean, you've said it's for the everyday person, but there's more to that than that. Like, why did you like? When I think of a writer, they have this like, what what made you write this book? What and why?
Thank you. I love that. And yeah, so if I had to kind of boil it down to a single avatar, I'd say I actually wrote this book for an Indigenous woman who's a good friend of mine. And I'm going to get a bit emotional, but I know this is a safe environment to do that. So her name is Patrice Misso, and I met her many, many years ago. Some of you might be familiar with her have heard of her wonderful product line called Satya Organic Skincare. And I met Patrice in the earliest stage of, when she was creating the product. It was called EE's Balm. It wasn't called Satya yet. And I met her sort of by chance, but whatever that is. She interviewed me, and I learned about this thing that she'd created that she was sharing with other people. She'd created, for folks not familiar with it, a very simple, effective remedy for eczema, to solve for her daughter's needs, because she didn't want to use steroid cream, and the allopathic doctor that she'd seen, that was the only thing that they could do for this child that was in so much pain. And so Patrice is a journalist. She did some research, super smart, went to her home crock pot and found some basic ingredients and made a balm that, healed this eczema for her daughter. So she started posting about it on Facebook and finding, how many people have eczema in their kids' lives, like so many. And anyways, but she didn't see her, like, she was like, I'm a journalist, I'm a mom, but I'm not an entrepreneur. And I'm like, friend, you've got something here that matters, that people need. Like, this isn't just about, I think she had this idea, to Tina's point about, like, an entrepreneur is somebody who's trying to make a lot of money, or just kind of in it for themselves, or this kind of big ego trip or whatever. And I said, no, like, you've got something that people need. It's valuable. In order for you to be able to deliver that value to others, there needs to be a business model around this. There needs to be a way. We need to creatively deploy the tools of business in service of a social and environmental change agenda. So basically, you are actually taking the master's tools, to use Audre Lorde's famous phrase, to dismantle and reimagine the master's house. This is the point here. So coming into power in a good way, you are using money, and you are using business, and you are using people's human needs to consume products, for their health, for whatever, to survive in a good way. You could be doing that in so many different ways, but this is a good way. And so encouraging her to see herself differently, to find community, to connect with the SBIs and the CEOs, and so on. So I would say I wrote this book for my dear friend, Patrice Mousseau, but like so many other people, she's not alone. Like, to me, she typifies just a profile of someone who maybe does not have a business background. Like, again, this profile of an entrepreneur, we think, you need to be for profit. Well, guess what? You don't. You need to have a business background. Guess what? You don't. You don't, like, so many things about the construct just need to be blown up into smithereens. And also just the idea that you're in it to make money. It's like, most of the entrepreneurs I know are in it to change the world. And so that's who I wrote the book for.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And yes, the entrepreneurs that I know are in it because they have this calling deep inside that they have to do it. They it's not about the money at all. And when you do something that you love, the money will follow anyways. So just forget about the money and concentrate on why you're doing what you're doing. I'm so glad I asked that question, because I did not know that about Patrice. I mean, I knew about Patrice Mousseau, but I just find that very interesting, your why. So thank you for sharing that.
I'd love to jump in with a question for Madeleine, because so much of the fire in which you wrote this book, the burning, that has guided you ever, for 20 years, for the last 2 decades. I'd like to, as you know, I'm a bit of a visionary, and I'd like to ask a question and I'd like to start writing the book for the next 2 decades. Because the book is based on what we've learned and observed and gathered, and and what we want to share based on our lived experience and a culmination, and it's so powerful. And now I'd like to project us forward for the next 2 decades. And I believe we're at a tipping point right now where, as brave change makers, which I think is interchangeable with the word entrepreneurs, self-sustaining brave change makers, there's 2 points that I'd love to dig into. One is our role as active advocates and activists for this work. It touches on the confines in which we're trying to expand this work. And I just have a comment about that, and then I'll fire it off to everyone. And the other is around how do we, in the next 2 decades, do a better job of building the ecosystem of change making with linking, arm in arm with the powerful organizations that are out there to really up-level, vertically lift what is around us, just like the ecosystems we see, coming together for other purposes, because there's some powerful change makers out there. So the first I'll just touch on is just honestly what you said. You're between a rock and a hard place sometimes if you are a for-profit business doing social good. You don't fit quite anywhere. I've had some people say to me, "Oh, you're for profit? Oh. And then I've had other people say to me, either way I've answered that question, I don't ever quite, fit as a social entrepreneur. That's all I need to say about that. And the other piece is, again, I think we're at an opportunity now, just like we're talking about braiding individually. Now it's time to braid collectively, organization to organization, and really build out the ecosystem of change making. And it's going to take leaders stepping up across these organizations to do that.
Yes. I love this. So I'm going to start or try and answer this by talking about biomimicry, actually. This is something that I'm really, really interested in, basically looking to models in nature as we consider ways to kind of be in the world and organizations to create. So lots of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the work of Dr. Suzanne Simard, who's a UBC forestry PhD professor. She's recently, or I guess a couple years ago, put out a book called Finding the Mother Tree, which I highly recommend to anyone to seeking to understand anything more about forests, which are obviously very topical right now. But what I take away from that book is not just the power of a woman's story seeking to succeed in a male-dominated the science that she is performing in this, and that she has performed, reveals the fact that, contrary to all of the wisdom around, and this is so colonial and so capitalist, the idea that trees and forests are competing with one another. They are competing for light, for water, for nutrients, and that's how it works. That's why they grow, because they're going kind of against one another, and that's what makes them grow. The work that Dr. Simard has done completely contradicts that. So are you seeing a metaphor here for business, life, everything, right? There's been this false construct overlaid even on forests that this is just reality. This is what's causing growth. And in fact, it's not true. There are the networks of roots, these mitochondrial networks are incredible. Trees actually talk to one another. They share nutrients, they share information. This is what they're doing. The mother trees are literally lifting up all of the other ecosystem in that forest, right? And so when we think about organizational development and even human development in this way, it gives it a very different feeling. It's like we're literally born to lift one another up and to build community. But we have been socialized to Christina's comment, the soup that we have been swimming in is really negative and really this competitive, again, the list, patriarchal, colonized, capitalist, da 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 da, set of values that tells us that there's only so much to go around. We need to fight it out with one another. Like, this is the entire construct around business. That's just how it is. You got to crush the competition, and you got to, do all these things. And I really don't think it's helpful, because what it's created is radical growth, income disparity, economic disparity. Like, companies grow well beyond what is healthy or reasonable. We're left with this weird world where you have a super high concentration of wealth in the hands of very few people, and the vast majority of people having less than that. And anyways, it's messed up. We need to be learning from these natural systems. And similarly, there's an economist called Kate Raworth, who talks about growth and scale in a very different way. So currently, even in the social venture space, everybody still wants scale. Scale, scale, scale. And that is defined as being perpetual, exponential growth. So she says, if you look around in nature, nothing grows that way. Nothing. Well, one exception, cancer grows that way. It's like, it's just not meant to happen. If you look at how a tree grows, how a human being grows, how, an animal grows, there's a very rapid growth start at the beginning, when it's young. And then it kind of levels off, a period of growth called thriving. It's like, ask yourselves, when was the last time any of you got taller? Right? We don't. We're the same. We're going through, we're having our cycles, we're going, and then as we enter, let's call it the autumn of our lives, we drop seeds, we procreate, we regenerate, we seek to, nourish the future generations. That's our purpose. And so what if we designed organizations to mimic those growth patterns? And what if we ourselves embrace them as new metrics of success, as opposed to this permanent up and to the right hockey stick kind of growth that is completely unrealistic, unhealthy, creates all kinds of inequities and externalities. And yeah, so anyways, that's a long way of saying that I look to nature, and I know that a lot of what I'm saying that, is like, whoa, look at this, like, has been indigenous wisdom for millennia. And, that we work in harmony with natural cycles, that we think about the future generations, we think about the long-term consequences of our actions. And so anyways, I just want to acknowledge that as part of this. I didn't discover this, I'm learning it from others. And part of the process, and just to go back to 1 second, what Sharon was saying, like, yes, we are decolonizing stuff. I'm interested in re-indigenizing. Like, how can we take this wisdom that people have held for so long and re-imbue it, bring it into the business world, bring it into the entrepreneurial world, because this is the most vital this is what's going to save us, in my opinion. Thanks.
Oh my gosh. Bam. I just want to pause there for a second, go bam.
Can I just add, I like that term, re-indigenizing, as opposed to decolonizing. It's the positive. I'm going to start using that. So thank you. I'm just blown away by this conversation.
Yeah, and to me, that's the act of resistance, right? Modeling our economic system after natural systems, right? That's an act of resistance. And we have so much personal power, I think, around that, right? How we view the economy and how we view money, how we spend our money, like the spending versus recirculating, right? Recirculating money, and because it's all energy, right? And seeing it as energy, to me, that's very much an act of resistance. And I was thinking about, one of the things that you were talking about when you're talking about entrepreneurs, and that they're that energy exists in us. We're solving problems, right? That's how ingenious we are, is that we're solving problems for ourselves and then for others, for the collective. And so you're not doing, as we think about ourselves as, again, recirculating in the economy, it is not. This is why our purchasing power, conversations about our purchasing power and the way we spend our money are really, really key to this active resistance, in this, in reimagining and um, in, indigenizing our economic system and working with the natural systems. Yeah. So I guess what I'm what I'm trying to say in all of that is that for those who are listening, you have more power maybe than you know, and so let that land. Being and part of a raising, and again, the level of consciousness is being aware of your own personal power in shifting a system, in as an and as an act of resistance, as being a hero. Like all of those things that we've just talked about have, I think you just baked the pie and handed us this beautiful pie that can't wait to dig into.
Thank you, Christina. I want to throw it a piece in here too, if I may. I have a question for you, Madeleine. Is so when I listen, I'm tracking, and so one of the things that you said, because I host the Leader Path, and so part of what happens after we end this is I'm going to be moving some things over there that are really specific and tangible. And you actually gave us a couple of steps. And I just want to see if I got them right. It's like the first thing you got to do is you have to see yourself as the change maker or the entrepreneur, whatever. See yourself as the thing. Then you find your community or your trees that you're rooting with to fortify. That's step 3, is to fortify. And then I hear in the fortify, you said this thing, and you got to put a business model around that, is what you said to your friend. I'm like, oh, so that's a step 2. There's something in putting the business model around that, which then led us into this conversation about mimicking nature. I'm like, is that a step? Like this business model, something in there. And then what I hear next goes to a bit of my own work in the world, which I, as a story coach, I go through it like a story spine, and who, what, when, where, why. But the when is about the specific when of time that you're in. And when you said resistance, if I was a change maker, not taking on the responsibility of the specific when of this time, I may not look at my change from an energetic motion forward as resistance. I might look at it as I actually am thinking about that beautiful photograph in the 60s of the flower, holding the flower in front of the soldier. And that is resistance, but it's not necessarily a motion forward resistance. It's a holding. And I really hear in this specific when of this time that there's action in our resistance that is asked for potentially, or the opportunity for. And so I think I'm digging around to see if there's a step in here that is showing up in our change making, to be in the active resistance that is not passive, but is definitely reconciliatory. And does anything come up for you around that?
I love this so much. Yes, it does, as a matter of fact. So I'm just writing a few notes as I'm listening to you. And I love that you are interested in story, because that is actually kind of the missing step in this. And so no accidents that you're the one to think of that question. And because how we create this community and how we engage it's on an emotional level. And it's through sharing, like, what is your vision? How do you want to change the world? Once you get past I am a change maker, I am an entrepreneur. I've got something I'm working on. This is my vision. The more kind of often and articulately and sincerely and authentically we can share that story and that vision with others, that is literally the magic. That is the mitochondria of the roots. That is what the roots are exchanging with one another, is the frequency of the currency. When I say frequency, I mean on an energetic level. I don't mean how often. That is the feeling of that is what people will build community, will make people want to help you, will in share the story in their networks, to spread this whole thing. So that is sort of thing number one. And thing number two, that comes up when you mention this context of like, why now? Like, what about now? I think times have never been more desperate or more compelling than now. I mean, I don't need to tell all of you, like, for goodness sake, like, oh my, like everything is just being blown wide open and it's all hands on deck. Like, these are not peaceful times. These are disrupted times, that are open. There's an openness. There's a, and even though that in some cases comes from, there is violence and there is disruption and there is a lot of uncertainty and fear and all of those things. The way I'm looking at it is that if everyone who has been marginalized or otherwise underestimated, and I love that term, that was coined by a woman called Arlen Hamilton, who I encourage everyone, here's next for your book club, everybody. It's called It's About Damn Time by Arlen Hamilton, who's an amazing sort of venture capitalist, believe it or not, in the United States. Anyways, this is our time to collectively step into our power. So it doesn't need to be big. The scale is not the hockey stick. The scale is radiant. The scale is as root systems grow, we are reaching outward to one another. We are reaching laterally and, across generations and across professions and across all kinds of racial divides, gender stuff. That is the new scale. I'd say, in fact, impact is the new scale. Like this whole buzzy, 10x, returns, like, forget it. We need to think about it in a far more nuanced, complex way. And so if we're going into this thinking, oh, well, my venture needs to be scalable or my project needs to whatever, because I got to get on Dragon's Den and it's like, no, this is not the world that we're living in anymore. We are living in a world where we need to kind of dismantle this adversarial notion around investors and entrepreneurs and what we're doing. And so I wrote down, if not now, when? And if not me, who? And I don't know who originally said that. I think it might have been Elie Wiesel, but that has always resonated with me, because when we're looking outside of ourselves and we're thinking, oh, I'm not that person, but maybe, Charlene Sanjanko is an amazing leader. Not me, I'm just a XYZ. Or, Madeleine Shaw, look at her, she wrote a book and whatever. It's like, no, it's like, it is you. But it's when we step into this collectively, when we kind of like imagine a group of people, like to your image, Tina, of the flower and the gun. When we do this together, when we lock arms together the way that we do at protests, then we can do this together. It's like it's the collective power in this, and also just the community. It's like you don't feel alone because you're not the only one. We're doing this together. And then we've got a whole other kind of scale happening. Like if you, like, just for a moment, like breathe into the idea of every single person who has an idea for a social change initiative of any scale, because we don't even really know what that is. Like once you cast the pebble into the pool of water, once you actually set your mind, once you declare your intention, once you pick up the sword, once you tell that story, whatever it is, once you shift your mindset around who you are, you don't know where that's going to go. We don't know, right? So let's find out. Like there's no reason to hold back, and there's no reason to wait. We just need to be able to, be willing to expand our sense of self and to ask for help, and knowing that we don't need to be alone in doing it.
I think you just gave us our closing words. There's no reason to hold back. There's no reason to wait. Right? I'm going to capture the rest of it later, but there's no reason to hold back. Off we go, arm in arm. Wow. So I'm going to pass to you, because I know you and Madeleine know each other well, and I would love, we're on our last 3 minutes, and I just want to pass to you to close in the relational way of love between friends.
I'm just deep gratitude with the conversation and the energy behind it, and it continually up levels. It lifts this continuous weekly conversation in Gather for Her. It's not any one conversation. It's that continuous ripple of conversation. And I think what came for me is just remember to look at nature. And I'm going to reflect on a couple of the books. And Madeleine, I will reach out, because I'm writing the book for 2 decades from now. And there's so much, like, it's funny, like, it's about damn time. That's fire speak. Like, that's how I feel every single day. And it's like, yep, it's about damn time that we do this or we do that. But deep gratitude for you for being here, Christina, for leading the conversation, and Sharon for the Indigenous lens and the wisdom that you bring, and Tina for holding the story that is all of us. It's as we live and breathe, and just breaking down this physical and understanding that it is truly us. So I will leave it at that with deep gratitude. And I encourage all of us to pick up Madeleine's book. What does she have for us? And to dig in. Thank you for being here, Madeleine.
Thank you, friends. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm deeply honored. I raise my hands and express deepest gratitude to all of you, and just thank you for making time today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day.